So as everyone is adjusting to our normal, as you could say, the healthcare profession is one that's been quickly adapting to these changes, and specifically as we look for hopefully the return of sports. And joining us today is the Director of Sports Concussion Program at Baylor Scott White. It's Dr. Reynolds. And she's been big in this effort to make sports ready to come back. Dr. Reynolds, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing great. So first off, of course, we've got to ask, how has you and your family specifically been adjusting to these kind of wild times that we've been living in recently?
Yeah, it's been quite an adventure. I have a daughter who just finished her freshman year at the University of Arkansas, so she was forced to come home. And then my youngest, my son, today is his last day of kindergarten. So we have been trying to manage, two people essentially working from home, having both kids home. And the biggest struggle has just been making sure everyone stays active and everyone stays, engaged with our activities the best we can. But it's certainly been interesting.
Definitely an age gap there, so I can imagine that the little kindergartner is a little different finishing up school from home.
A little bit, yeah. I really hope that next year they focus on reading and writing, because we definitely have dropped the ball a little bit, but that's okay. He's going to be fine.
Too funny. So obviously, like you said, you've been working from home. How have you been staying in contact with your patients during COVID-19?
Yeah, so we were kind of thrown into this new world that we had to figure out very quickly. Before this happened, so in February, we were starting to push towards this idea of telemedicine. And the idea behind that was because, we're located in Frisco, Texas, in North Texas, and we really wanted to be able to reach the families in El Paso and San Antonio, in the far reaches of Texas that maybe didn't have the same resources. So we were starting to set up these models to be able to see patients from long distance. And then all of a sudden COVID-19 hit, and we had to totally, reorganize everything. So we had the foundation in place for how we were going to do it, and it just required us to think really quickly. We essentially overnight shifted from seeing patients in our clinic to doing it entirely virtually. And so that's in myself, our sports medicine physician, our physical therapist. We've been through all the different platforms trying to figure out the best way to provide care. But it's worked really well, and we've been able to keep up with our patients. We've been able to see new patients. And now as the world starts to get back to normal, we're starting to see them again in the clinic. So we're very hopeful that things are going to continue moving in the right direction. But what's been good about this is it has forced us to really look at this telemedicine issue. And I do think that over the course of the next year, we're going to be able to extend further and further into those underserved areas and help those kids that really don't have the resources there.
Absolutely. Kind of a little bit of a silver lining out of something that has been just a little bit wild. But obviously,
Exactly.
as you can see in the news, sports are starting to make plans to come back in all levels of sporting events. But what advice do you have specifically for high school athletic trainers as they greet kids back?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things to think about. There's the physical aspect, which is more for the coaches, which we can talk about. But, I'm concerned about the overall mental health, especially when we're looking at sports that would have been continuing through the spring, and the seasons were just abruptly stopped. And now we're going to ask them to come back and get back in the swing of things. And I think it's going to be important for athletic trainers to be more diligent about checking in with these kids. Some of these kids, it's not great when they're home and they're not in school. Some of these kids have not been able to access the type of nutrition and resources that they can get. So I think checking in there is going to be really important. And then the other piece is just taking, a status check every day. How are you feeling? There's a lot of fears. There's a lot of people who aren't afraid, and you're not going to know unless you ask them. I think that if we don't do a good job with that, we could set the stage for some division between teams. And that's what we don't want to do. We want to make sure these kids are all really comfortable doing what they're asked to do.
Absolutely. And you hit on it a little bit at the beginning of that, but how should coaches approach these first few practice sessions from a health standpoint when high schools are being able to start that strength and conditioning training on June 8th?
So I think it's great that we're getting back to that, because these kids, my number one thing is need to be active. And so these kids need to be active. But I think it's important for coaches to remember that not everyone has been able to do the workouts they've been sending out, or maybe not everyone, like I said, has had the same nutrition they have as when they're in school. So you may see some steps back with some of these athletes. And the biggest thing we want to focus on is preventing injury, right? So entering into it, knowing we may be taking 2 steps back, you're going to get right back to where you were before. But I think not pushing them too hard, or maybe just taking a status of where they are at the beginning and working with your athletic trainers to get them back where they need to be, is going to be the best way to go about it.
Now, you had mentioned, obviously, that you were located up in North Texas. So how has the state-of-the-art facility at the Star really enhanced your care practice that you can give to the area athletes?
So we have a 300,000 square foot facility at the Star. We're very lucky to have that. And it's really helped us to advance not only our clinical offerings, but the research that we're able to do. So we've started to do some research looking at how can we get kids better faster, what factors like sleeping during the day, not drinking enough water, which factors correlate to longer recovery times. But we're also able to bring kids in, and given the sports performance center that we have, we're able to work them out in a safe, non-contact environment. And that allows us to get kids moving much faster than we ever could in the past. The old theory of concussion is you wait it out, you rest a lot, sometimes you go in a dark room. That does not work. It does not work for athletes. And so if we can get them moving as quickly as possible after the injury in a safe, controlled way, we have so much better outcomes, and the kids are happier, the coaches are happier, everyone feels better. So having that space and the support of the school districts around us and the Cowboys who we partner with at that facility, it's been really great.
And then obviously it seems like y'all are making big strides, like you said, in trying to kind of change that concussion protocol a little bit. But before I let you go, what changes have you experienced in terms of just concussion awareness for all levels of football?
So I started doing concussion only in 2012. And so from 2012 to 2017, I was in Western Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh. I've been here since 2017. And when I first started, we were always asked to do a lot of education, which we still are. Still see these pockets, just this mentality. I've heard coaches call it the C word. They don't even want to say it. And the message I always try to get out is that concussion is nothing to be afraid of. It's a completely treatable injury. You have to be active to get through it, but it's really important that we identify it. And the kids are going to miss less time the quicker we identify it, the quicker we treat it. So that's the message that I continue to push out to coaches, and just try to work with them to not be afraid of it, not look at it as, it's, the end of a season or anything like that. And I think we're coming around. The more conversations I have, people seem to be more engaged with that and more thinking in that way.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Reynolds, we can't thank you enough for your time today. We hope that you and your family continue to stay safe, and hopefully, we're ready for sports to be back just as much as y'all are. So best of luck in all of that.
Thank you so much.